No spin, no bias and no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. As Boris faces pressure from Red Wall rebel MPs, has the government done enough to tackle the issue of levelling up? I believe the PM must ignore London's metropolitan liberal media so he can keep a laser focus on delivering his highly ambitious agenda. That's in my digest. Before I get my superstar panel's thoughts tonight, the Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Patel, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and political editor at the Sunday Mirror Nigel Nelson. As Sadiq Khan threatens to grind London to a halt over his budgeting failures, is he the capital's worst ever mayor? The first man elected to that role, Ken Livingstone, thinks Boris deserves the crown. But the London Assembly's Conservative leader Susan Hall says Khan is more political commentator than leader. They'll go head-to-head in the clash at 9:20. What's prejudice behind the UK's arrogant dismissal of South African experts who tried to reassure us on Omicron? The GP who first discovered the scariant, Dr. Angelique Koutsias, was on this show making a plea for calm that fell on deaf ears.
Do they need to panic? No, please don't panic. Don't tell people you're going to get severe and you're going to go to hospital.
She's back at 9:45 to try and make sense of it all. Is it fair for anyone to lose their livelihood and even their home over their COVID views? Former Coronation Street and Owl Girl actor Sean Ward was left with nothing after being blacklisted by the seemingly liberal world of the performing arts. He's uncancelled at 10:20. As a major US network gives in to demands by suspending Whoopi Goldberg over her shocking Holocaust comments, will we ever learn to educate, not eliminate people who make mistakes? Well, US superstar journalist and podcaster Megyn Kelly gives us the latest on that huge stateside story. Have the hippies of the 60s betrayed their counterculture principles by going from champions of peace and love to free speech censors? Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill thinks the Joe Rogan Spotify row has exposed Neil Young, Joni Mitchell and their fellow radicals as allies of fear, and he's the outsider at 10:40 tonight. As the leader of no opposition takes this swipe at the PM...
He and his Chancellor are the Tory Thelma and Louise, hand in hand as they drive the country off the cliff.
Do Boris and Rishi need to ditch the national insurance rise to avoid any more embarrassing jibes from the tax-loving Labour Party? Plus, as the COVID fatality rate plummets to flu levels, is it time the government scrap the obsessive daily death toll? I'll get to my panel's views and give you a first look at the newspaper front pages hot off the press. That's throughout the media buzz. Plus, of course, I'll coronate a new greatest Britain and Union jackass before the end of the show too. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Boris Johnson must cancel the daily publication of COVID death figures if the UK has any hope of learning to live with this virus that is fast becoming endemic. The newspaper reports today that the PM is intending to axe publication of the numbers so adored by the BBC by Easter, as the infection fatality rate for COVID plummets to be comparable to the flu. I've had a huge problem with the daily death toll for a long time. Firstly, even the BBC now admits the numbers will include poor souls who died of other causes. But more importantly, the whole thing skews the public into thinking that only COVID deaths matter, because that's all we're hearing about. In the weekend in January the 21st, there was an average of just over 1,800 deaths a day in England and Wales, meaning only a relatively small percentage died from COVID. If the BBC and others really want to go on with their daily mortality tally, something I think is wholly macabre, then it's about time they also inform the public about how many of those deaths were as a result of cancer, of heart attacks, of strokes and of suicide. A single-minded focus on COVID isn't getting us anywhere. We'll debate this issue with my superstar panel later in the media buzz. Let's take a look at the news first, though, with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Our top stories. The Prime Minister has told President Vladimir Putin that any Russian incursion into Ukraine would be a tragic miscalculation. Boris Johnson and Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone to each other today about tensions over Ukraine. According to Number 10, both leaders agreed that aggravation was in no one's interest. All that comes as US President Joe Biden sent nearly 3,000 American troops to Eastern Europe. John Kirby from the US Department of Defense saying the troops are there to bolster Ukraine's defences.
The United States will soon move additional forces to Romania, Poland, and Germany. I want to be very clear about something. These are not permanent moves. These forces are not going to fight in Ukraine. They are going to ensure the robust defense of our NATO allies.
John Kirby. Well, Northern Ireland's Minister for Agriculture has ordered all post-Brexit checks on goods coming from the rest of the United Kingdom to stop from midnight tonight. Edwin Poots says he sought legal advice which supports his view he's entitled to stop the checks. The checks are imposed by the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was agreed by the UK and the EU to ensure the free movement of trade across the Irish border after Brexit. But the DUP minister believes it's created instability within the country's power-sharing institutions.
I've now issued a formal instruction to my Permanent Secretary to halt all checks that were not in place on the 31st of December 2020 from midnight tonight. I'll prepare a paper for executive consideration in the near future to seek agreement on a way forward.
And we'll keep an eye on that story for you as we approach midnight. Well, the Levelling Up Secretary today unveiled the government's plans to tackle regional inequalities. Michael Gove pledged that by 2030, pay, employment and productivity will grow in every area of the UK. He told the House of Commons the plans would boost the UK's economy by tens of billions of pounds annually.
The economic prize from levelling up is potentially enormous. If underperforming places were levelled up towards the UK average, unlocking their full potential, it could boost aggregate UK GDP by tens of billions of pounds each year.
The Mayor of London has put the Police and Crime Commissioner on notice after the exposure of highly offensive messages sent by Metropolitan Police officers. Sadiq Khan warned Dame Cressida Dick the messages reveal a culture of racism, homophobia, bullying and misogyny within the force that she must drive out. That comes as the Home Secretary Priti Patel told the Commons Home Affairs Committee that the messages indicated a failure of leadership. And lastly, the Duchess of Cambridge is the new patron of the Rugby Football Union and Rugby Football League. Did that. Taking over the role from Prince Harry, Kensington Palace said the appointment's due to her long-standing passion for sport. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now time to get back to Dan Wootton and Tonight.
Forget cake, forget ABBA, forget birthday parties, even forget devilish Dom's drive to Barnard Castle. Today's Levelling Up announcement by Michael Gove, with 12 pledges to transform deprived areas of the UK and close the gap between the North and the South, will determine whether the Tories are given an unprecedented fifth term at the next election and whether they have any hope of governing into 2030. But has the government done enough to tackle such an existential issue? The jury's out. Michael Gove is indeed correct that the government will be defined a failure if it doesn't deliver its moral mission to improve the lives of overlooked communities outside the elites in London.
Boris has been very clear that what we need to do is to change the economic model in this country. Power and wealth has been too concentrated in London and the South East. We don't want to do anything to undermine London's success as a global super city, but we do want wealth to be spread and power to be spread more fairly across society. It should be the case that whether it's in Ballymena or in Aberdeen, in Aberystwyth or in Middlesbrough, that there should be good jobs and you can stay close to the place that you love but still achieve everything you want.
Gove's words are why I'm so frustrated that it's those elites in London who seem to constantly drive the government's agenda, largely thanks to the way the metropolitan media work together to scare the PM and his team into action they deem important. Would the police be investigating Partygate and much of the machinery of government currently be paralysed if BBC News, ITV News, Sky News and virtually every other broadcast outlet besides this one had decided that Partygate was the most important story in the country and should dominate the news agenda every day for the past 2 months? For Levelling Up to succeed, I truly believe the government needs to stop marching to the beat of the drum of the London liberal media elite. Many of the people, dealing with the real struggles of post-pandemic life have switched off from traditional mainstream media outlets because they have rightly become so disillusioned with coverage that does not reflect the issues impacting them day to day. It's the reasons behind the decision to Brexit in 2016, which no one in the Westminster bubble ever thought would actually happen, and the smashing of the Red Wall 3 years later, by the way, too. But the goal to level up was smashed to smithereens by the government's response to COVID-19 the past 2 years. Do you remember when cities like Manchester and Bolton were plunged into economy-destroying lockdowns for months longer than many southern areas? That damage is going to take a long time to fix. Now, metro mayors might sound great, but if you look at the disaster of Labour's failed Sadiq Khan, who is driving London into the ground, they may actually do more harm than good. In reality, there are probably not enough specifics announced today, but I do have a lot of respect for the principles. Most important are the pledges to increase pay, employment and productivity in every area by 2030, to boost local public transport to London standards, boost reading, writing and maths standards, 5G coverage for the majority of the population, a realistic path to home ownership for renters, and reduced crime in the worst areas. But now we must see delivery. And delivery without dither, delay or any more excuses. Boris must ignore the London left-wing media and put his government's internal problems to one side in order to provide a laser focus on ensuring his highly ambitious Levelling Up agenda is a success. But to respond now, my superstar panel. The Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Patel, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the political editor at the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Sean Bailey, let me come to you first. Is this enough? Has your party done enough here?
Look, what is a government for? A government is to deliver, and to set it out in these clear terms is very useful. There'll be councillors of all political stripes up and down the country excited by the fact that they will get their hands on the power and can distribute the money. But there's two things that have to be said. Firstly, some of that will have to happen in London. Remember, some of the poorest communities in the entirety of Europe are here in London. So this isn't an anti-London agenda, it's a pro-people agenda. And the other thing to be said as well is, as a country, it benefits all of us if the power is spread evenly. What London needs, what Aberdeen needs, what Liverpool needs is strong cities across the country, not this concentration down in the southeast. So I think it's the right thing to do, and it will be how the government's judged. Labour had an opportunity many years ago when everything was right, the economy was right, they had the biggest majority seen for a long time, and they failed to deliver. So if the Conservatives can get this done, they will get that fifth term.
Amanda Patel, I'm sensing you're a little bit more sceptical than Sean.
Don't preempt me.
Well, am I correct?
Well, I was watching Michael Gove's delivery today, and I thought, you know, Moses only gave 10 commandments. He's given, what does he call them?
12 commandments.
He's given. And one of them is, thou shalt not fib. And honestly, most of this money is old, Dan. Most of this money was allocated by Sunak, by the Chancellor, ages ago. So it's not new money he's sprinkling around. There are just so many fibs in this. It's almost like promising every woman in the country, you know, thin thighs and world peace. You know,
by 2030.
Earlier than that. But there's a fundamental sort of dishonesty here, is that it's a wonderful, it sounds great, but there's no mechanism to give the money to the various areas that need it. They should just be giving them money to build their infrastructures, do the things they want to do, trust them. As you said, Sean, you know, finally devolve some power. But you can't devolve power without devolving money. And I just thought, listening to it this morning, and I thought, oh, my Lord, and I just hearing levelling up, and I just thought, don't look up, because you'll see pigs fly.
But, Nigel Nelson, governments are accused all the time of being short-termist, you know, of only playing to the next election, of only dealing with the current news cycle. Should we not be congratulating Boris and Michael Gove for actually saying, we're going to be ambitious for this country and we are going to look to the long term. And look, 2030 feels a long time away, but if they fail, they will be judged by these 12 commandments today.
Yeah, well, the 12 commandments are 12 missions, which in fact turned into 12 ambitions. You're absolutely right when you said earlier that what we didn't get was any specifics. How are you going to get from here to there? So, of course, levelling up is a laudable kind of idea, but it smacked to me a lot of when David Cameron came up with Big Society.
Oh, I know.
Again, it was a great idea. The notion that by helping others, we help ourselves, the idea of community. Michael Gove talked a lot today about community and strengthening communities. David Cameron did exactly the same thing. Then he couldn't articulate it, and as a result of that the policy kind of frittered away.
Sean, you're disagreeing.
Let's be very clear. This is a mission for the entire country. This will involve councillors, politicians and the working public. That's why that 10-year horizon is important. That's why the devolution of power is important. The only reason mayors are important because responsibilities and cash follow that. So there's a framework there. We know what metro mayors look like. We have one here in London who's wasted a lot of cash.
So where's the cash that's going to follow the mayors?
Yeah, well, when you set up those mayoralties, the cash comes. Look, let's be clear. There isn't tons of new cash washing around. I'm not claiming that. Right. But what it is, it's about the effectiveness of that cash. We have lots of cash in this country that's being wasted. London is a great example of that. If you give metro mayors that are much more accountable to the local people, things will happen.
But you accept they need the funding to go and do the job of devolution.
I absolutely accept.
And none of that was in this document today about exactly where they're going to get that kind of funding from.
No, but the money already, most of the money already exists. It's in these small little pots under poor leadership. What you need to do is collate that money properly so you can have proper city-wide plans, so you can deliver for a city. The most important thing for poor, struggling communities in all of that speech was the eradication of crime and the promotion of work. They're the things that are transform the communities in this country.
Yeah, but in a day when we had the police saying that we are now going to do this, we've done this experiment where every time there's a burglary, we're going to go to their house. And this is a revolutionary new thing. You think, well, actually, isn't that what you should have been doing all along? I mean, it just seems to me that... And I've got to say, Dan, I've got a bit of a downer on Michael Gove. He was Mr. Lockdown. He was one of the two cabinet ministers who forced us into that second lockdown disaster. And did you hear what he said at the end of his first interview today? They said, he said, I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, I'm going to play that later on, actually.
I'm sorry,
I'm going to play that later on. Amanda, were you surprised that Boris Johnson, given how important levelling up is to his entire agenda and also given the political storm he finds himself in the middle of, are you surprised that he didn't front up himself today?
No, because he's doing Margaret Thatcher. So he's doing his, I'm out in the Ukraine saving the world. And quite frankly, he needs to be out of the heat for a bit. But goodness me, I mean, could someone sort out that tie of his? I mean, you see where...
Boris.
He was there with the Ukraine president, who looked immaculate. Statesman-like. And Boris is there with his white shirt hanging out the front, there's tie all over the place. And you just think, and his cuffs on the ground. I mean... Please, can someone sort him out?
What made me worry a little bit...
Carrie isn't around.
Well, what made me worry a little bit, Sean, is that he doesn't look healthy at the moment. And look, I'm never one to judge someone's appearance. I know what it's like when you've got the whole... I know you are, which is why I'm asking Sean about this. But look, he needs to be looking after himself at the moment, is all I would say.
The last time I spoke to Boris, he was in fine form, especially considering the pressure he's under. But this is the thing. This is a country-wide mission. The reason I use the words councillors of all stripes, it will take the country to rebuild these things. The idea that someone sat in Westminster, Prime Minister or Michael Gove, and just sends a decree down and the world changes is wrong. Yeah. What we need to do as a nation, as individuals, is take some responsibility for the people around us. If you look at Sadiq...
That's the Big Society idea that never...
No. I accept your thing about the money, but I give you an example. You look at Sadiq Khan, all he's ever done is blame the government. He has £20 billion annually, and he blames the government. Somebody needs to stand up for the people of this country.
Sean, I disagree with you there. He's ripped up half of the roads and put in cycleways.
Well...
Tell me he hasn't done anything?
Well, depending on where you sit, that's a bigger problem.
I don't sit in a bike, I can tell you that.
Amanda Patel, Sean Bailey, Nigel Nelson, thank you so much. My superstar panel are here all night. But coming up, will we ever learn to just educate, not eliminate folk who make mistakes in public? Well, a major US broadcaster hasn't, as it gave in to those demands to suspend Whoopi Goldberg over her shocking Holocaust comments. US superstar journalist and podcaster Megyn Kelly, well, she's been there. She's been in one of those storms and she knows what it's like to be sacked by a major US broadcaster. She'll bring us the latest at 9:30. But up next in The Clash is the aforementioned Sadiq Khan, London's worst ever mayor. As he busies himself bankrupting the capital's transport systems, the first man elected to the role, Ken Livingstone, and the London Assembly's Conservative leader Susan Hill go head-to-head after the break. And as always, your view matters the most to me. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. We've got a poll running there right now too. Back in just a moment.
Hi there. A cloudy night for most of us, with some rain, mainly towards the northwest, and it will be mild with that blanket of cloud covering the UK. A warm front has gone through. That continues to march northeastwards overnight, and following that warm front, we've got a westerly breeze and mild, moist air coming in off the Atlantic. So that breeze is bringing that extensive cloud cover. A few breaks in the cloud across central and southern parts of the country overnight, but nothing particularly widespread or long-lasting. And even under the cloud breaks, with the breeze coming from the west-southwest, it is going to stay mild. Temperatures, well, around 8 or 7 degrees first thing. 4 Celsius there in Lerwick, one of the colder spots, but frost-free for virtually everyone. And damp towards western hills and coasts in particular, with that rainfall persistent over the Welsh Mountains, the Pennines, the Scottish Highlands throughout much of Thursday. However, there will be some cloud breaks for central and southern parts of England, South Wales, some sunshine coming through for Thursday afternoon. 11 Celsius here, but it's turning colder in the far northwest as a spell of wet and windy weather arrives. A lively spell of weather with some heavy rain and gales along this feature as it moves south across Scotland, Northern Ireland into Northern England and Wales. And over the higher ground of Wales, Northern England and Scotland, we're likely to see a brief spell of snow. Could even see some snowflakes to lower levels in places, particularly the southeast of England, by the end of Friday night. Colder air is following the weather front, but also brighter skies. So once early cloud and rain is out of the way from the southeast, actually plenty of sunny spells. However, the cold wind will feel raw and it will contain a lot of showers in the north and the west, those falling as sleet and snow over the higher ground and even to lower levels for northern Scotland. Saturday brings with it more cloud and some rain in the far north, along with a strengthening wind.
Megyn Kelly and Brendan O'Neill on the way, but it's time now for The Clash. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has threatened to close the tube and shut bridges after a black hole in the capital's transport budget soared to an astonishing £1.5 billion. Transport for London board papers have revealed that plans for a new road user charge, council tax hike and congestion charging zone expansion will not be enough to balance the books. Khan has accused the government of starving the network of cash despite reduced passenger numbers during the pandemic. But isn't this just another chapter in the failed London mayor's catalogue of incompetence? Knife crime in Khan's lawless London has been close to record levels throughout his troubled tenure, and pre-pandemic levels were far higher than when Boris Johnson left in 2016. Khan has also bowed to the pressure of liberal vandals by setting up a commission to review statutes and rewrite history in the eyes of the woke mob. And who can forget Khan's rebellion against the government and science after he demanded Londoners stay muzzled on the transport network he is now threatening to grind to a halt. But despite all that, is he really London's worst ever mayor? Well, I say yes, but as always, it's your view that matters to me. Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews, and we've got our poll running there right now too. But first, let me bring in a man who knows what it takes to run the capital, former London Mayor Ken Livingstone, and someone familiar with a Khan crisis, the Conservative leader in the London Assembly, Susan Hall. Susan, let me start with you. Is Sadiq Khan the worst mayor London has ever seen?
Absolutely, by a very long way.
Why?
you've started with your BT thing at the beginning. If you start with police, it's absolutely shocking. Crimes last year, 30 people died. Sadly, 30 teenagers died. That's the worst ever. Whereas Boris improved things. I'm sure Ken would agree with that, or not. We'll hear. Look at the way he's run TfL into the ground. There's so many things he's done wrong there. He's looking at bringing in a £5.50 charge, a boundary charge, which will absolutely cripple businesses, cause major problems. The ULEZ that he's brought in a year early, without even thinking of how that's going to affect the poorest Londoners. The list goes on and on. He is a shocking mayor, really bad. And you've got Ken there. To be fair to Ken and Boris, both Ken and Boris love London. Sadiq doesn't love being mayor. It's the best job in the world, and I'm sure Ken would agree with that, even if it's the only thing we agree with.
Boris probably agrees with that right now too, Susan. I think he'd quite like to be back there.
Well, of course he would. It is the best job in the world.
No, but I hear what you're saying. Sadiq Khan just wants to use it as a launch pad international politics, which, by the way, is hopefully just a pipe dream now, given how bad he's been. Ken Livingstone, look, you're clearly not going to say you were the worst mayor. But surely you must concede, after this litany of failures by Mr. Khan, that he is a worse mayor than Boris Johnson.
No, you've got to look at the situation he's inherited. When I became mayor, I got billions of pounds out of the Labour government, able to employ 10,000 more police, build all these transport extensions and things like that. Whereas poor Sadiq Khan has had to cope with a massive reduction in local government funding, and he's struggled to keep things going. It's not his fault. Blame this government, which has made the worst cuts in local government spending, not just here in London, but all over the country, in my lifetime. And so don't blame Sadiq. He's doing his best. And frankly, you're going to live longer because he is mayor, because he's tackling the pollution of our atmosphere, and that's going to make us all live longer.
Oh, hardly, Ken. I mean, I think we've got to look to China to sort that out. I don't think introducing cycle lanes in London is going to make the difference. But Ken, how can you say that Sadiq has done a better job than Boris?
Well, look, literally, he hasn't had the funding from government that I was able to get. I mean, this government, this last 12 years, we've seen the biggest sort of clampdown on local government spending of my lifetime. There's been nothing like as bad as this. I mean, this government has made cuts in local government spending that even Thatcher didn't do.
Susan Hall, how do you respond to that?
Well, I know Ken is very bitter because he lost his job to Boris, and he has forevermore been very hard on Boris when there was no need to be. I mean, and what you said about Sadiq Khan, when you were having there's a video of you and George Galloway talking about him. I don't see how you can say poor old Sadiq Khan. The things Sadiq Khan has done to London are an absolute disgrace. And of course, the government at some point had to start saving money in various different places because the amount of money the Labour government squandered at that time, and you need to be remembering that. Sadiq Khan has a £19.4 billion budget, and he does not spend it wisely.
Ken, does Susan make a fair point? Are you just bitter and twisted because Boris booted you from the best job in the world, your words, and it was a surprise, wasn't it? No one expected a Tory mayor of London.
But look, in that 8 years Boris was mayor, what did he do? The only real thing he did, he built the cable car to nowhere. I mean, he ended up opening a lot of the projects I'd started, but never invited me to those. He did very little, and that's exactly what he's doing as Prime Minister. This is the most incompetent government of my lifetime.
No,
Susan?
I'm sorry, I really can't have that. Boris increased stop and search, murder rates fell drastically. London was a far wealthier city when he actually left. He cut road traffic fatalities. He built far more affordable homes than you did. I mean, look at Khan. He's broken his promises, whether it's 2 million trees that he said he'd put in and he hasn't. No strikes he promised. Well,
yeah. And what about this whole idea, Ken? What about this whole idea, Ken, that Sadiq Khan sees himself as a political commentator in a way? He's not about all Londoners. He's about a narrow subset of Londoners. So he attacks Donald Trump. He boxes up the Winston Churchill statue at Westminster. He doesn't support our police. It's wrong, isn't it? We don't want a mayor who's a political commentator. We want a mayor who represents all of us, Ken.
I think he does commentating. All politicians do that. But to criticise Donald Trump, I think that's a very sensible thing to do. I mean, he was a disaster. The simple fact is he's having to cope with
He's the American president on a state visit to the capital city. Show some respect.
Yeah.
And you know what, Ken? I actually think when you were mayor, you would have shown respect, actually.
Yes, he would.
What, for Donald Trump?
Yes.
No, I think Donald Trump.
I think you would have shown respect because when you were mayor, you stopped a lot of your freelance political commentary because you understood that you had to represent all Londoners.
Yeah, I had to work with the government, and of course, Tony Blair had done everything possible to try and stop me becoming mayor. But then we worked out. We got a very good working relationship. An awful lot was done. London improved. But the thing that was most significant...
No, I'm not disagreeing with that, Ken. I thought you were a good mayor.
But look,
actually,
if you look at it, those 10,000 extra police that I recruited, crime came down massively. And now, of course, under this government, police numbers are down. Crime's gone up. And that's the important thing. Public spending creates a better life for everybody in this city.
OK, well, I think when you look at the spending from this government, it's at record highs. But fascinating debate. That was former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, and the leader of the London Assembly Conservative group, Susan Hall. Thank you to both of you. So who do you agree with? Well, Paddy on Twitter is in no doubt and says Sadiq Khan is the worst by a very long country mile. From Alex on Twitter, who disagrees, he says Johnson was the worst by a country mile and he wasted taxpayers' monies on stupid pipe dream projects, which Ken referred to, so agrees with Ken. Rob on Twitter says, yes, he is, of Sadiq Khan. What has he actually done since he's been re-elected? Absolutely zilch. And your verdict is now in, and it doesn't make for good reading for Sadiq Khan. 93% of you agree that Sadiq Khan is London's worst ever mayor, while just 7% of you disagree. Now, coming up, was it prejudice that led to the dismissal of South African science as it tried to assure us that the Omicron variant was mild? Well, Dr. Angelique Coetzee, the GP who first discovered it, joins me at 9:45. But next, as a major US network suspends Whoopi Goldberg over her shocking Holocaust comments, isn't it time we stood up to cancel culture that solves nothing? US superstar journalist and podcaster Megyn Kelly joins me to give her take on a massive story stateside. That's straight after the break. It's Megyn Kelly time now, the top US journalist, host of the Megyn Kelly Show podcast. And Whoopi Goldberg has been suspended from her presenting role on US talk show The View after she claimed on air that the Holocaust wasn't about race.
The Holocaust isn't about race.
No.
No, it's not about race.
It's about a different race.
But it's not about race. But these are two white groups of people.
Well, they don't have to black people
see them as white people.
But you're missing the point. You're missing the point. The minute you turn it into race, it goes down this alley. Let's talk about it for what it is. It's how people treat each other.
After a carefully crafted Twitter apology, Whoopi made it obvious she stuck by her initial view during a car crash appearance on Stephen Colbert's late-night chat show. But she wasn't allowed to return to The View to have another go.
Yesterday on our show, I misspoke. Now, words matter, and mine are no exception. I regret my comments, as I said, and I stand corrected. I also stand with the Jewish people, as they know, and y'all know, because I've always done that.
But clearly the gods at ABC News weren't happy as she was suspended for 2 weeks within hours of leaving the studio. Kim Godwin, president of ABC News, said, While Whoopi has apologised, I have asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. The entire ABC News organisation stands in solidarity with our Jewish colleagues, friends, family and communities. Well, Megyn Kelly joins me now. Megyn, you know a lot from personal experience about what these big US broadcasters are like when the heat is on. However, a lot of people thought Whoopi Goldberg was going to be given very different treatment because she is on the liberal side of the argument. Do you think it was right that ABC suspended her?
No, I'm not in favor of the suspension, never mind a firing. But I do think she's getting different kind of treatment than most people would get. And I think the reason she's getting that special treatment is because she is of the left. They know that she's on their side ideologically. And I think the fact that she's a woman and she's a woman of color also help her. Because these are things that are revered by the folks making these decisions. And you need look no further than her own network, right? They fired Gina Carano, who'd been working for Disney, an actress who had made a comment on Twitter comparing the COVID lockdown procedures and sort of restrictions to Nazi Germany. And she got fired for it. Right? She got fired for that. No problem whatsoever. They fired Chris Harrison, a host of The Bachelor. For 25 years, the guy hosted the thing. He defended a contestant. It had come out that she had gone to an antebellum party years and years earlier. And he kind of said, it was like, are we using today's standards on the cancel culture on this girl? Fired. He got fired, lost his job. No problem. No questions asked. Whoopi Goldberg basically says, oh, that whole Holocaust thing. Well, that was kind of like hurt people. That's it. Had nothing to do with race whatsoever. And they're like, maybe you could use a 2-week vacation during which you'll get your $100,000 a week salary each week. Enjoy. Right. So there's no question that there's a double standard. And I don't want to see her punished for saying something stupid. She's taken a stab at an exploration on an issue, and the underlying issue we can get into, but it's worth discussing about this book that was banned. It wasn't banned. It was actually just taken out of a curriculum because the parents in Tennessee thought it was a little bit too mature for 8th graders. But The View would tell you that it had been banned. It hadn't. Anyway, so they're trying to take a stab at a tough subject, and she screwed up. And she clearly believed her screw up, and that's because of her left-wing ideology. I mean, she sees race as only one thing, and that is the color of one's skin. And if you do not fall within her identitarian view of what qualifies as sort of a group that can be unfairly targeted because you have that color skin, she can't compute it. She doesn't understand. Like, it can't be. Jews, in her mind, can't possibly be on the diagram of oppression because that's not what she's been told by the other leftists. And she's right. They don't see Jews as oppressed people. They don't acknowledge that they were treated by Hitler as another race, as an inferior race. That's what the Holocaust was all about. So she really couldn't seem to compute it. Now, the main point I want to make, though, Dan, is this is the world that wokeism hath wrought. How you like it now, Indeed. Right? So it's really hard to feel sorry for her because she's been part of the creation of this. Yeah. She, her co-hosts on The View, her network, they love to cancel people. They love cancel culture. They love wokeism. They celebrate when any conservative goes down or somebody who perceives conservative. So it's really hard to feel bad about what's happening to her. Nonetheless, I don't agree with it.
Well, Megyn, they don't even have a conservative or a particularly right-wing voice on that show at the moment because Meghan McCain, the daughter of John McCain, who was the right-wing, quote-unquote right-wing panelist on the show, even though she is anti-Trump, Meghan McCain just couldn't stand it anymore because the 4 liberal left-wing ladies started to bully her, essentially. Yeah. And I look over at the rival show on CBS, The Talk, where Sharon Osbourne was treated with absolute brutality by the network simply because she said Piers Morgan had the right to say that Princess Pinocchio, Meghan, tells the odd fib, which is just a fact as far as I'm concerned. And not only was she booted, her whole American TV career seems to be over. So I completely agree that there is a double standard. But for me, I still hate the fact that Whoopi was suspended because I think what this shows is that The View needs to have a plurality of opinions on their panel because if they have had someone like Meghan McCain there, perhaps Whoopi wouldn't have been allowed to get away with what she said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, listen, I couldn't agree more. But what sane conservative would want the job? People have asked me a million times whether, I would want that job, right? Because
I was thinking that. You'd be perfect.
Oh, sure. I mean, it would be so fun to have bamboo shoots shot underneath my fingernails, but I'm not going to do that either. It would be torture. There would be hell on earth. And Meghan McCain was bullied out of that job. Not only was she loathed by her co-stars, she was loathed by the executives. She was loathed by the audience. She had like one camera guy who liked her, right? Of course, the staff, the cool guys, the crew are always the ones who have your back. If you're nice, if your crew does not have your back, you're a bad person. So of course, who would blame her? And Abby Huntsman before her, who left that job. Abby Huntsman's dad, he was ambassador to Russia. He's done a lot. They've got more money than God. I'm sure she was sitting there thinking, I don't need to do this. What the hell am I sitting here for amongst these hens who hate me? So she pieced out. Then Meghan McCain pieced out. Now they're stuck with somebody named Sarah Haynes, who is as milquetoast as they come and unwilling to take strong positions on anything, which is how she's surviving there. Look, they don't want conservative views. All of this is happening right now as this other thing happens in the United States involving Georgetown law, where a guy made a comment ripping on Biden for saying, I'm going to pick a black woman. And he tweeted out like, well, you know, the best candidate is this Indian judge who's liberal. Why don't you go with him? Anybody else would be lesser. And he inartfully said a lesser black woman. Well, he's about to lose everything because of this tweet for which he apologized. He pulled it down. Why? Because they don't want this conservative at Georgetown law. They don't want conservatives at any of these big institutions, whether it's media, legal centers, on the bench, any of them, sports, we could go on, right? And slowly but surely, they're canceling them out. I will say, Dan, I resolved a few months ago that even though I'm not in favor of cancel culture, I totally get and to some extent endorse fighting fire with fire. You know, let them feel the pain. Why does the one side have to just keep taking the beatings and the cancellations? And then when it comes back to haunt the people who are the cancelers, say, oh, we're sorry, it's not right. You know, I can fully understand the theory of fight fire with fire. And only once the left starts to feel the pain of seeing its own go down might this madness finally end.
No, indeed. I think it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because the number of times I have seen that panel call for someone's head, demand for someone to be sacked, insist that someone lose their life and livelihood. And even though I don't want to go down that path, I can understand why some folk are saying, well, you reap what you sow, Whoopi.
Mm-hmm. How do you like living in this world, in this unforgiving, nasty world in which there's no grace for someone like Whoopi, who held what appears to be a genuine opinion, as ill-founded as it is?
Yeah.
And now she's what? She's going to go to re-education camp over these 2 weeks? Bull. No, she's not. She's just going to keep her mouth shut. And then there's not going to be a full-throated discussion about this. Maybe others feel the same as Whoopi on the left, right? They think that Jews don't fit into this sort of class of people who have been persecuted by race because they to them look white. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's help those people understand the other side of the story. No, it's just punishment. Keep your views to yourself. Everyone must hurt. And on goes the cycle.
Yeah, it is. And that is the disturbing nature of cancel culture, Meghan, which is why we have to keep on calling it out. Meghan, thank you so much. And Meghan's talking a lot more about this story in the most recent episode of The Megyn Kelly Show, which is available on Sirius XM in the US, as well as on YouTube and as a podcast for international fans. Well worth a listen. Now, coming up, as Keir Starmer conveniently forgets Labour's love of levies to mock Tory taxes, do Boris and Rishi need to ditch the national insurance hike to avoid any more hypocritical jibes from the leader of no opposition? My panel will debate that in the Media Buzz from 10. But first, did prejudice inspire the ignorance towards South African science after they reassured us about the Omicron variant? Well, the doctor who first discovered it, Angelique Coetzee, will weigh in on that straight after the break.
Hi there. A cloudy night for most of us, with some rain, mainly towards the northwest, and it will be mild with that blanket of cloud covering the UK. A warm front has gone through that continues to march northeastwards overnight, and following that warm front, we've got a westerly breeze and mild, moist air coming in off the Atlantic. So that breeze is bringing that extensive cloud cover. A few breaks in the cloud across central and southern parts of the country overnight, but nothing particularly widespread or long-lasting. And even under the cloud breaks, with the breeze coming from the west-southwest, it is going to stay mild. Temperatures, well, around 8 or 7 degrees first thing. 4 Celsius there in Lerwick, one of the colder spots, but frost-free for virtually everyone. And damp towards western hills and coasts in particular. with that rainfall persistent over the Welsh Mountains, the Pennines, Scottish Highlands throughout much of Thursday. However, there will be some cloud breaks for central and southern parts of England, South Wales. Some sunshine coming through for Thursday afternoon. 11 Celsius here, but it's turning colder in the far northwest as a spell of wet and windy weather arrives. A lively spell of weather with some heavy rain and gales along this feature as it moves south across Scotland, Northern Ireland into Northern England and Wales. And over the higher ground of Wales, Northern England and Scotland, we're likely to see a brief spell of snow. Could even see some snowflakes to lower levels in places, particularly the southeast of England, by the end of Friday night. Colder air is following the weather front, but also brighter skies. So once early cloud and rain is out of the way from the southeast, actually plenty of sunny spells. However, the cold wind will feel raw and it will contain a lot of showers in the north and the west, those falling as sleet and snow over the higher ground and even to lower levels for northern Scotland. Saturday brings with it more cloud and some rain in the far north, along with a strengthening wind.
Welcome back. Senior Government Minister Michael Gove has apologised for attempting to force the country into an unnecessary lockdown over Christmas, even though South African experts warned the Omicron scariant was less severe.
In Cabinet was concerned that we may need additional restrictions and argued for them. I was wrong. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor were right at Cabinet a couple of weeks ago. I won't say what anyone else said. I'll tell you what I said, which is, I'm sorry, on this occasion, I made a mistake.
Oh, yes, you did. Of course, the main woman who alerted the world about Omicron and its milder symptoms was the chair of the South African Medical Association, Dr. Angelique Coetzee. This is what she told me on the show in December.
Because the majority of your people are going to get Omicron. Let's face it, I can't get away from that. And do they need to panic? No, please don't panic. Don't tell people you're going to get severe and you're going to go to hospital. You are actually priming them to go to hospital.
So now, quite rightly, people are asking whether the fact Angelique was ignored by our government and their so-called experts was because of prejudice against South Africa. And I'm delighted to say Angelique is back with me now. Angelique, what do you think was behind the fact the entire British scientific and political establishment seemed to completely ignore what you were saying. I mean, there you were on the show, being very clear what Omicron is about. You've been proven to be completely right. But we had our chief medical officer, Chris Whitty, Sir Christopher Whitty now, believe it or not, speaking to the nation in a press conference saying everything we know about Omicron is bad. Why were you ignored, and why was South Africa ignored?
Yes, Dan, that's a very good question. I've learned in my life, one of the things are the moment when you are a general practitioner, that's the first thing. You're not up there with the scientists. You don't have enough clout. You're just a general practitioner. What do you know? So that's the first thing. Second thing is I'm a female. Third thing is I'm coming from Africa. And what would we know? Not to say that these people who were criticizing me in England I don't know whether they've ever seen a patient, an Omicron patient or a Delta patient. I'm not sure whether they have treated them from the street like we do. So, and then, we know our scientists. We have got some of the best scientists in the world. So, and before I got onto any of the media programs, I made sure with my constituency, with my other fellow colleagues, what are you seeing? As chair of SAMA, I do have access to all the different doctor groupings, and I communicate with them. And, it was so bad with Britain that at some stage I just gave up. I said to one of your news stations, you know what, in South Africa it's a mild disease. But in UK, it's a severe, or in Europe, it is a severe disease, because that's what you want me to say. And I cannot change the definition of mildness, but it's a mild disease, I promise you.
And you were right. The thing is, actually, you were completely right. So when you saw senior government ministers like Michael Gove and Christopher Whitty and Neil Ferguson and all the main scientists and SAGE demanding that Boris Johnson plunge the UK back into a lockdown for Christmas, lock the country up again, were you thinking they've gone mad?
Yeah, I was wondering, on what planet do they live? Because the virus is not a South African variant and a UK variant. It's the same variant. The virus doesn't give a damn about whether you're from Britain or South Africa. That is what it's done. The symptoms are the symptoms. We know there's some subvariants of the Omicron, but again, nothing to be alert on, because it doesn't change any treatment, it doesn't change the clinical picture, but they can even use this now to say there's a scary type of variant going around, and it's not true. But again, if you look at, I call it the old boys club. They've got their own ideas, they do what they want to do. They will not take advice. They have not learned over the years that other people also might from a third world country like South Africa, we just might be right, Even the guy from the Netherlands that criticized us as well, in the end, it actually showed that the Omicron was eventually, actually, first time coming from the Netherlands, and not so much from South Africa. And you will remember in the beginning I said it's everywhere. It's already in your country. When you try to shut down the borders, it was already there.
How ridiculous. Well, look, I think they all owe you an apology, if I'm completely honest, Angelique. Look, tell me, because you've been so right on this Omicron variant right from the start, how do you think it's tracking now? And do you think Omicron is going to be the ticket for the world out of the pandemic? Because it is a pussycat. And by the way, I can say it's a pussycat, Angelique, because I've had it, and it was a pussycat. Bit of a bad cold for a few days, but it's a pussycat, as you always said it was.
I said it was a storm in a teacup. or in that one newspaper article. So what do I think? I think it's according to hit and run type of variant. It hits hard and then it's gone. So where it's going, what is happening in the background, we're not sure. We would see. We look in South Africa. We saw a clear pattern, and we will now go into about 3 months where we won't see a high number of positive cases. And if we look at the past 2 years, we should expect, if there's a new variant or if something is going to happen, it should be around about May and June. And only in about 6 months from now on would we be able to say, okay, it's starting to become endemic, or there's a new variant. And what would the new variant look like? We don't know. No one. There's no scientist. They can predict as much as they want. This is an unpredictable variant, and it's not Omicron that changes to a new variant. It's a new variant that will develop, and hopefully it won't. But it's there. We need to look for the next 6 months, and after 6 months we can speak again. We can have a conversation again and say, it seems as if we are out of the woods. But
well, we absolutely will, Angelique, because you're someone who I trust, because you don't just go for the hysteria, you look at the facts. And I wish a lot of our top scientists here in the UK, the Whitties, the Valences, the Fergusons, I wish they took a similar approach to you and tried to dial down the fear, unless there is genuine bad news. So, Angelique Coetzee, on behalf of the country, apologies that our government didn't listen to you, but I did, and a lot of the good folk out there did, and we really appreciate you coming back to speak to us tonight.
Thank you.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton Tonight, and we might just be in a parallel universe if Labour can accuse the Tories of being a high-tax party, as they did at PMQs today.
He and his Chancellor are the Tory Thelma and Louise, hand in hand as they drive the country off the cliff.
Well, we'll be discussing whether the Tories really need to axe this tax cut in the media buzz with my superstar panel. Now, also on the way today, we'll meet the actor who was blacklisted by supposedly the most liberal industry out there at a time when performers were already struggling to make ends meet. Sean Ward is uncancelled at 10:20, and there he is in Coronation Street. What a guy, and he deserves to be acting again. Have the hippies of the 60s betrayed their counterculture principles by silencing voices outside the mainstream COVID narrative? Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill says Neil Young and Joni Mitchell should be ashamed for railing against free speech in their row with Spotify over podcaster Joe Rogan. He'll give his groovy take on this story in The Outsider at 10:40. Plus, as the COVID fatality rate plummets to flu levels, is it time the government scrapped the obsessive daily death toll? I'll get my superstar panel's views in the media buzz at 10:30, and as ever, before the end of the show, I'll coronate another Greatest Britain and Union Jackass from my panel's nominations. But before all of that, the news headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. Our top stories tonight. The Prime Minister has told the Russian President Vladimir Putin that any Russian incursion into Ukraine would be a tragic miscalculation. Boris Johnson and Vladimir Putin held a phone call today about the tensions in Ukraine. According to Number 10, both leaders ended up agreeing that aggravation was in no one's interest. It comes as the US President Joe Biden sent nearly 3,000 American troops to Eastern Europe. John Kirby from the US Department of Defense said the troops are there to bolster Ukraine's defenses.
The United States will soon move additional forces to Romania, Poland, and Germany. I want to be very clear about something. These are not permanent moves. These forces are not going to fight in Ukraine. They're going to ensure the robust defense of our NATO allies.
John Kirby. Well, here, Northern Ireland's Minister for Agriculture has ordered all post-Brexit checks on goods coming in from the rest of the United Kingdom to stop from midnight tonight. Edwin Poots says he sought legal advice, which supports his view that he's entitled to stop the checks. The checks are imposed by the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was agreed by the UK and the EU to ensure the free movement of trade across the Irish border after Brexit. But the DUP minister believes it's created instability within the country's power-sharing institutions.
I've now issued a formal instruction to my Permanent Secretary to halt all checks that were not in place on the 31st of December 2020 from midnight tonight. I'll prepare a paper for executive consideration in the near future to seek agreement on a way forward.
The Levelling Up Secretary unveiled the government's plans to tackle regional inequalities today. Michael Gove pledged that by 2030, pay, employment and productivity will grow in every area of the UK. He told the House of Commons the plans would boost the UK's economy by tens of billions of pounds annually.
The economic prize from levelling up is potentially enormous. If underperforming places were levelled up towards the UK average, unlocking their full potential, it could boost aggregate UK GDP by tens of billions of pounds each year.
The Mayor of London has put the Police and Crime Commissioner on notice after the exposure of highly offensive messages sent by Metropolitan Police officers. Sadiq Khan warned Dame Cressida Dick the messages reveal a culture of racism, homophobia, bullying and misogyny within the force that she must drive out. That comes as the Home Secretary Priti Patel told the Commons Home Affairs Committee that the messages indicated a failure of leadership. And the Duchess of Cambridge is the new patron of the Rugby Football Union and Rugby Football League. She takes over the role from Prince Harry. Kensington Palace says the appointment is due to her long-standing passion for sport. Good for her. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GBNews. Now more from Dan Wootton and his guests on Tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight, now in our media buzz. First look at the newspaper front pages hot off the press. The Metro goes with Putin gives Boris a buzz. The paper reports that the Royal Air Force intercepted 4 Russian military aircraft flying near the UK shortly before the PM picked up the phone to Vladimir Putin today. Boris Johnson warned the Russian president an invasion would be a tragic miscalculation. Also on the front page, their lovely photo of the Duchess of Cambridge getting stuck into some rugby as she celebrates becoming patron of the Rugby Football Union for England. That's a role inherited from Prince Harry. She'll be going head-to-head with her hubby, of course, who holds the same role for Welsh rugby. The Independent leads with the pressure on Boris rising again after a 12th Conservative MP openly called for his resignation. Sir Gary Streeter, one of the party's longest-serving MPs, also became the third backbencher to submit a letter of no confidence today, following Tobias Ellwood and Anthony Mangal. One Red Wall MP told the paper that determination to oust the PM had been hardened by his refusal to retract his claim that Keir Starmer failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile while the Labour leader was Director of Public Prosecutions. My superstar panel back with me now, the Star Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the political editor at the Sunday Mirror, he's also a star too, Nigel Nelson. Now, breaking tonight, more Tory backbench trouble for Boris Johnson with 3 more MPs, Tobias Ellwood, who is chair of the Defence Select Committee, Sir Gary Streeter, and Anthony Mangal, all submitting letters of no confidence. This is starting to look like a coordinated attempt to me to unseat the PM, and I think it's time for the backbenchers to put up or shut up. Admittedly, Boris and Chancellor Rishi Sunak haven't exactly helped themselves by refusing to listen to the sane folk who have lobbied for the government to axe the controversial national insurance tax hike. But look, there was the irony of all ironies at PMQ today, with the high tax party to end high tax parties, Labour, slamming Boris for apparently turning the Tories into a high tax party.
Mr. Speaker, for all the bluster, the truth is the Conservative Party are the party of high taxes because they're the party of low growth. They are the party of high taxes because they're the party of eye-watering waste. They've treated taxpayers as an ATM machine for their mates and their lifestyles. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that he and his Chancellor are the Tory Thelma and Louise, hand in hand, as they drive the country off the cliff and into the abyss of low growth and high tax?
The irony of Starmer's attack wasn't lost on the PM either.
You want to know about Labour economics? Never forget the last time they were in office, Mr. Speaker, when they were finally booted out, they left a note saying there's no money left. That's the way they run the country, Mr. Speaker.
In case you need reminding, Labour's former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, with Starmer in his shadow cabinet, wanted to claim an eye-watering extra £83 billion in taxes to fund colossal state spending. So 2 big questions for me tonight. How does Labour think it can criticise the Tories on taxes when in 2019 they launched a manifesto which, had they won, would have taken the country's taxes to its highest levels ever? And why the hell didn't Boris and Rishi reverse course on the national insurance increase, which Amanda Patel, your newspaper, has been telling them to do on your front page virtually every day now for the past 2 weeks?
The one thing about the Daily Mail is we have a really good instinct for Middle England, and what's Middle England? They are Conservative voters. And there's no one, there's no sensible person that thinks this NI tax is a good idea. It's going to come in on April 1 when we have fuel prices, the average fuel price in the house is going up 600 quid a year, will be £2,000. You've got food prices skyrocketing, you've got all petrol prices skyrocketing, and this is one thing that they could actually do. It's within their gift. But I'm told that the reason that Boris won't give it up is that he thinks solving the care crisis,
social care
will
issue,
be his legacy.
Long term. Do you agree with that, Sean Bailey? Is that worth the short-term pain of this tax hike?
The first thing that has to be said is very rich of Keir Starmer to say those
That's
words.
for sure.
He's from a party who were going to nationalise everything.
Yeah.
Where would the tax bill have been
That's
then?
true.
The second thing to say...
And that was before we were even in a pandemic,
exactly.
By the way. So imagine what it would have been if Labour had been in power and we'd been dealing with a pandemic.
The mind boggles. But look, there's 2 things. Firstly, ordinary people will feel this. If you earn £20,000 a year, this will be a £10 rise per month. And we have a cost of living crisis coming down the pipe. But also the thing that ordinary people feel very keenly is the state of the NHS, particularly social care. Somebody does need to sort that out. And if you're a Prime Minister... And hold on. If you're a Prime Minister...
I just opened my mouth.
If you're a Prime Minister and you've
got the measure of her already, Sean Bailey.
And you're building a legacy...
I don't want him on again. This
would be a great legacy to build, because this will cover everybody. We're talking about one of the fundamental things that makes this country great, our NHS. But a word of caution, tax is always painful. So the Chancellor should be working harder to reduce our bills elsewhere. That's the job of the Chancellor. I would hear more.
Can I say something now?
That really is scary, because what that means is let's cut public services. I'd rather see tax go up than see public services cut. So you can argue about whether taxes should rise or not.
That's because you're a Labour-supporting newspaper.
It is indeed. And when everyone's slagging off...
You're a lefty,
when everyone's slagging off the Labour Party at the moment, Rishi Sunak has just taken on board John McDonnell's economic policy with the money...
And that's why we're so angry.
That's what we're worried about.
But the country hasn't fallen apart, as the Tories predicted.
April 1 is when it starts to fall apart.
But we've already spent £400 billion.
And I'm sorry, Nigel, you must look at the inflation figures and start to panic. And that's before these tax hikes. That's before the energy bills skyrocket.
But when we go back to the tax business, there are 2 issues there. Is it right to raise taxes? I think it is. Is the national insurance tax the right way to do it? No, it's not. And what Keir Starmer was talking about was that it will hit people on middle incomes, well, actually on average incomes. So somebody on £30,000 a year will pay proportionately more of their income in national insurance than somebody on £100,000 a year. And that has got to be wrong. So what we should have is certainly raise taxes, but take it from somewhere else.
Nigel, the thing that really worries me about this most is that this, it's basically going to save the NHS and it's going to save the care system. The care system's not ring-fenced. You know it's going to happen. This money's just going to pour in.
It'll go straight into the NHS. You're right.
Pour into the NHS.
But here's the key thing we must do. We must hold the NHS to account. Theresa May gave them extra money. Boris is giving them extra money.
That isn't happening because Boris is lionising them. Boris is lionising the NHS. He's not holding the NHS to account.
When the public are paying the bill this directly, I think we have the right to ask.
But look, I've got a political development on Boris Johnson tonight. Breaking tonight, the PM has pledged to stand firm despite the unrest in the Tory party and has said he has no plan to quit following Partygate. And here's the good news for you Boris supporters. He will seek re-election in 2023. So this is a new interview with Boris and The Sun's political editor, Harry Cole. They spoke on the plane to the Ukraine, but these are new quotes just released tonight where he said, I am getting on with the job and I will do so for as long as I have the privilege and honour to serve in this position. He added, I've got a lot more to do. And when he was asked, Sean Bailey specifically, about the election, he said, I make no commentary, but I am focused on the next election. So this isn't a man who's drafting a resignation letter, is it?
Good on him. And let's see where Boris started. He started by delivering Brexit. And however you feel about how the pandemic was dealt with, the thing that history will say is that Boris came up. He fronted it up. When people were attacking him, he didn't send another minister out. He came out and gave the good and the bad news. And he's right. He has a job. He has to deliver. And Michael Gove's comment earlier today that this government will be judged on a levelling up agenda, that levelling up agenda came from Boris, so he should deliver it. Let's see what he's got for us.
OK, now the SNP could be accused of shutting the stable door after the COVID horse has bolted with their overreaching policies. Now, in their most bonkers move yet, they're literally cutting the door. I'm not even joking, folks. An eye-watering £300,000 has been set aside by the Scottish Government to chop the bottoms off 2,000 doors with, quote, problematic ventilation in schools and nurseries. This harebrained scheme, which was pitched by Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville, has baffled the opposition in Scotland. Willie Rennie, the country's education spokesman for the Lib Dems, urged the SNP to get serious and find proper solutions, adding that the plan is an insult to thousands of teachers and pupils. If this is the best the SNP can do, I say don't let the door hit you on your way out of Holyrood. I mean, Amanda Patel, their solution to the ventilation issue in schools, literally hacking the bottom off doors. Has Sturgeon lost the plot?
Well, there may be some wisdom in this, because I live in a really old cottage and you have to cut the bottom off the doors because they all get stuck. And then you have this furry stuff that you stick underneath it, which keeps them warm. That's true, isn't it?
I know, but this is about keeping the kids freezing.
Yeah, but
that's the whole point.
It's about ventilation. It is actually about ventilating classrooms
with freezing air.
Well, I mean, we have that problem anyway. The alternative is then to fling all the windows open.
Now, did you know how cold it is in Scotland in the middle of winter?
It's pretty cold here at the moment as well in the middle of winter. But the point basically is that schools need ventilating. What they should have is proper machines within the classroom to ventilate them, and that's what the SNP should be doing rather than slashing the bottoms off doors.
And it's a bit like
it's not a bonkers policy.
It is completely bonkers, and I'll tell you why. Because this ventilation in school thing is a complete misnomer. It's a complete distraction. It's something Starmer says all the time because it sounds like a good thing to say. Look, if you put 30 young children in a classroom, doesn't matter how well ventilated that room is, they're spending up to 8 hours a day in that classroom, the COVID is going to spread. And the sooner that we actually start to understand the COVID spreading amongst kids is actually not a bad thing, because this is how this country is getting out of this pandemic, because we have great natural immunity, unlike countries in Europe, unlike countries in, like Australia and New Zealand, which are vaccinating kids rather than allowing their kids to actually get COVID. I know you're not meant to say that, but that's the reality.
COVID onto their parents,
who are now vaccinated,
and then to their
and now protected because they're triple vaccinated if they want to be.
So if the kids have got it goes through the family, and
of course it does.
Vulnerable.
Of course it does. And maybe that was a conversation that we could have in March, April, May 2020, but not when we're in a country where 90% of English adults, I know we're talking about Scotland, but I'm just talking about the ONS figures in England, they're relatively the same in Scotland. 98% of adults have COVID antibodies. So actually, we don't need to worry now. We just need to stop these ridiculous
I am worried
policies.
about this cutting off the bottom of doors. Because I am really worried about that. Because once you cut it off, you can't put it back again. It's like a love affair when you say, I made a really terrible mistake and cut you in half, but now I want you back. You can't glue it back, can you?
Is it any real ventilation? Aren't you still just circulating the air in the same room that you're in anyway?
Absolute nonsense. Sean Bailey, Nigel Nelson to stand by, because coming up, we're going to stick with COVID, because as the fatality rate plummets to flu levels, is it time the government ditched the obsessive daily death toll and let people get on with their lives? My superstar panel will weigh in on that as the media buzz continues, plus another first look at the new front pages too. But before that, is it fair for anyone to lose their livelihood and even their home over their views on COVID and vaccinations? Well, former Coronation Street and Our Girl star Sean Ward, big name he was on those two shows, has been left with nothing after he was blacklisted by the supposedly liberal establishment industry. He's uncancelled straight after the break.
Hi there. A cloudy night for most of us, with some rain, mainly towards the northwest, and it will be mild with that blanket of cloud covering the UK. A warm front has gone through that continues to march northeastwards overnight, and following that warm front, we've got a westerly breeze and mild, moist air coming in off the Atlantic. So that breeze is bringing that extensive cloud cover. A few breaks in the cloud across central and southern parts of the country overnight, but nothing particularly widespread or long-lasting. And even under the cloud breaks, with the breeze coming from the west-southwest, it is going to stay mild. Temperatures, well, around 8 or 7 degrees first thing. 4 Celsius there in Lerwick, one of the colder spots, but frost-free for virtually everyone. And damp towards western hills and coasts in particular, with that rainfall persistent over the Welsh Mountains, the Pennines, Scottish Highlands throughout much of Thursday. However, there will be some cloud breaks for central and southern parts of England, South Wales, some sunshine coming through for Thursday afternoon. 11 Celsius here, but it's turning colder in the far northwest as a spell of wet and windy weather arrives. A lively spell of weather with some heavy rain and gales along this feature as it moves south across Scotland, Northern Ireland into Northern England and Wales. And over the higher ground of Wales, Northern England and Scotland, we're likely to see a brief spell of snow. Could even see some snowflakes to lower levels in places, particularly the southeast of England, by the end of Friday night. Colder air is following the weather front, but also brighter skies. So once early cloud and rain is out of the way from the southeast, actually plenty of sunny spells. However, the cold wind will feel raw and it will contain a lot of showers in the north and the west, those falling as sleet and snow over the higher ground and even to lower levels for northern Scotland. Saturday brings with it more cloud and some rain in the far north, along with a strengthening wind.
Brendan O'Neill and the greatest Britain and Union jackass will be revealed very soon, but it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top names speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, before the start of the pandemic, actor Sean Ward was living his dream, walking red carpets after becoming a household name with major roles as Coronation Street bad boy Callum Logan and as one of the stars of the big BBC military drama Our Girl. But within the past few days, Sean revealed he has been left unable to find work as a result of his views on COVID and vaccinations, resulting in him losing his 4-bedroom home and all his belongings, which were sold off by a storage company when he could no longer foot the bill. He claims his teeth even started to fall out as a result of the stress. And remember, Sean isn't a policy maker, he's an actor who has been blacklisted by the apparently liberal world of the performing arts simply for his opinions. Does he really deserve to have his life destroyed to such an extent? And does anyone? And should his ordeal be a warning sign that we as a society have lost all sense of proportionate response? And Sean joins me now. Sean, the segment is called Uncancelled, and obviously in your case it's incredibly appropriate because I remember just a few years ago, I mean, you were one of the brightest rising stars of British television. And the COVID pandemic has changed all of that for you. So what happened and how has this gone down?
I appreciate you calling me that. I never felt that I was the rising star of it all. But I think when I started to just look into it back in March 2020, I realised there was a few things that I wasn't too sure about. I didn't really think they did much of a risk assessment for the lockdowns.
Which is now something that's commonly accepted, by the way.
Yeah, massively, yeah. The isolation of the elderly, I don't think is even good for them. I know a lot of people that, I think it's called the nocebo effect, which is where you tell someone they're going to pass away, they will. So I think there's a lot of that going on. And I just felt that they were always going to come for the children. So that was where I drew the line for me.
And you're talking there about the move to vaccinate children?
Yes, sorry, yeah. This plan to inoculate the whole planet with every man, dog, child, cat.
And obviously we did see last night Pfizer revealing plans to trial a double vaccination dose on kids aged from 6 months old. So that is happening. So you took those positions, and obviously because you're high profile and you spoke out bravely, obviously there was a lot of backlash. Yeah. But how does that result in you being essentially blacklisted from your industry?
I have to take some responsibility myself. I allowed my life to kind of crumble apart around me. But I think from an insurance perspective, people wouldn't get me on because they knew, based off what I was posting online, that I was never going to do a PCR test. I was never going to tick a box and
say that you were vaccinated
because I stand by natural immunity. I refused to wear a mask. Once I'd looked into the data and realised mask particles, people wear like cloths that they make from home and still think...
Which again, by the way, is now being accepted by the medical profession, that cloth masks are utterly useless.
But I've been called a conspiracy theorist for the last 2 years. And so is everybody else. There's a lot of people like me that just want to have a nice, healthy scientific debate. Back in the day when we used to just talk about, and we'd have different opinions and
fundamentally, bodily autonomy is one of those absolute key tenets in society. I imagine when you saw what happened to Novak Djokovic in Australia, you felt great sympathy for him.
Yeah, massively, yeah. I love the fact he's called Novaks. Kind of rings true. But, I think he's done very well. I think a lot of people are in a position where they couldn't speak out, so I was willing to kind of take it on board. If anyone was at home feeling crazy, at least there was someone there with a blue tick that kind of had the same views as them. Because it's lonely and people are gaslit by the government or the medical industrial complex and told that we're just crazy. But as time's passed, a few things are coming out. So,
well, I think the tenor of the conversation is definitely changing. And even some folk that were doing a lot of the fair spreading over the first year are now starting to understand that they have been played in certain areas, especially when it comes to lockdown.
Yes.
But Sean, what do you say to people? I imagine there'll be a lot of people in your life, people who love you, people who care for you, who have said, Sean, just don't do this. Don't speak out. You've got this amazing career. You're a brilliant actor. Why are you doing this? Because you know what the consequence is going to be. Now, obviously, I understand why, but what do you say to them, those folk who say, you're actually ruining this amazing career?
For me, I never really got into acting to be famous or rich. So it's what gets you going, really. And for me, it was never about that. So I've always wondered why I was an actor or why I had this voice. And you won't catch me on Instagram selling protein shakes, but I'll try and sell you a bit of freedom or a bit of just hope that you can believe in yourself. I want people to realise that we all have a voice. And you don't need to hide or self-censorship or try and pretend what your opinions are just to fit in with somebody else.
Have you felt let down by your fellow actors? Because I imagine I've heard a lot about this, and I've been approached by some folk who say, look, good on you, you're fighting the good fight, I agree with you, what you're doing is the right thing, but I could never say something publicly.
I get a lot of that. All the people still watch my stories, so I hope it still kind of hits a nerve. I think at some point we might have to ask a lot of celebrities if we can see their tax bill from 2020 to see if they were paid by the NHS to push the vaccine, because that's another story. That they're allowed to be paid to push it, but I'm not allowed to not be paid to say, well, here's another argument.
And you mean because they were obviously hiring celebrities to be part of these advertising campaigns? And I think that whole nudge unit, in fact, we were discussing it on the show last night, the whole nudge unit, there are going to be serious questions asked about what essentially amounted to government propaganda. Obviously, public health messaging, sure, but not when you're trying to terrify folk to cower in their homes.
Especially
I think it went too far, didn't it?
Yeah, especially if they're partying. And even now, all this stuff with the Sue Gray looking into it all, like, no one's actually asking the question, why was the government not afraid of the virus?
I think that's the key question for me. It's not about the fact that they were having the parties. I don't give a damn that they were having the parties. In fact, in a lot of ways, I celebrate it because it shows that actually all of the things they were trying to put us through, they didn't really believe in. And they weren't scared. And they weren't scared for good reason. And by the way, that's not to say that there are some people who should have been scared of COVID, the vulnerable. And of course, because I'm a signatory of the Great Barrington Declaration, I absolutely believe we should be protecting the vulnerable, pumping our resources into that. But look, Sean, I just a final word. How do you see your future unfolding now? I mean, do you hope that you will return to acting?
Yeah, obviously I would love to. There's an amazing platform called Brand New Tube that I've kind of joined, that I do like a breakfast morning show. So, you know, it's anywhere we can go without censorship. You have to be so careful with these big tech. You know, we're up against big pharma, but we're now up against big tech. And
who censor us all?
I know, like, holistic medicine doctors that get shadow banned for talking about how healthy horseradishes are, because even that goes against the narrative. And we've never been told throughout this whole pandemic to be healthy. We've been told to sit inside and watch Netflix and stop ourselves breathing clean oxygen. So even now, the Secretary of State of Education, Nadeem Zahawi, he's triple boosted and he's in isolation. So it was never really a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And he's still pushing to jab all children. So when are we going to actually just get a bit of common sense, pull back from how we're so scared of being cancelled and just have these actual chats?
Indeed. Well, Sean, you know I think it's so important to keep having these conversations. We'll keep doing so on this show, and I hope you do come back. But in the meantime, I would just say to all of those gutless TV and acting agents, don't judge someone because of their political views. That goes against everything your industry should stand for. Sean Wood, such a pleasure to have you tonight on Uncut. We'll speak again very soon. Now, coming up, have formerly free-loving hippies, speaking of the liberal industry, given up on their counterculture beliefs to become beacons of COVID censorship? Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill says Neil Young and Joni Mitchell have allied themselves with fear as they demand Spotify silence podcaster Joe Rogan. He'll give his take on the Woodstock whiners in The Outsider at 10:40. But next in the media buzz, as the COVID death rate plummets to levels comparable with the flu, is scrapping the COVID daily death toll a vital and necessary step to learning to live with the virus? My superstar panel are back to give their view next, and you'll get a first look at some more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And we're back, and let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages just in. The Eye reports the government's levelling up plans are coming under attack due to a lack of ambition and funds. Michael Gove has pledged to make the UK more equal, but sources have told the paper there will be no more money for levelling up gaps and no more tax rises. Well, I think that's good news. Daily Telegraph, here's where the government's money is going, though. Sunak splashes out to ease bills crisis. The Chancellor will tomorrow unveil a multi-billion-pound package to help consumers pay for energy, which includes state-backed loans for firms and a council tax rebate for the poorest families. But Rishi has been resisting calls to cut green levies. Cut them, for God's sake! Oh, it makes me mad. We don't need them. The Daily Mail also leads with Rishi's attempt to slash the cost of living for the poorest in our country, but leads with the news the energy price cap is to rise by around £650, taking the average household bill to nearly £2,000. My God. Next, The Guardian, like many papers tomorrow, leads excitedly on the embattled PM facing fresh calls to resign. That's what gets them off at Guardian Towers. 3 more Tory MPs publicly called on Boris to go today. Also, a warning for Cressida Dick as pressure goes on the scandal-ridden Met chief following the promotion of an officer involved in the racist messages scandals. She should go for a whole load of reasons. Same story in The Times. 15 million households could benefit from the additional support, with the poorest households enjoying the biggest rebates. The Chancellor is also expected to confirm plans for a discount on energy bills of £200. The Daily Express leads with reports that RAF jets were scrambled to intercept Russian bombers before the PM warned Putin not to make a tragic miscalculation and invade Ukraine. The tough-talking PM urged for dialogue and diplomacy to end the crisis. And the Daily Star also leads on that crisis and Joe Biden's approval for 3,000 US troops to be deployed in Eastern Europe. The publication sums up the threat of war with the headline, "Squeaky bomb time," and referring to their splash yesterday asks, could we not just settle it over a slice of Colin the Caterpillar cake? More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, the Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Patel, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and political editor at the Sunday Mirror Nigel Nelson. Now, are we set to finally see an end to the fear-mongering daily COVID death toll as people are given the peace of mind to get on with their lives after the pandemic? It can't come soon enough, in my opinion. The I newspaper reports today that the PM is intending to axe publication of the numbers so adored by the BBC by Easter, as the infection fatality rate for COVID plummets to be comparable with the flu. As data from the Zoe Symptom Tracker app shared with the Telegraph shows, there were more than 9.2 million UK COVID infections since the start of December and 10,670 reported deaths, an infection fatality rate of just 0.11% over that time period. An average flu year's infection fatality rate is estimated to be higher at 0.12%. Plus, latest data from the Office for National Statistics shows that deaths in England are currently below the 5-year average for this time of year. So, Amanda Patel, I'm all for stats, I'm all for data, but why is it when the stats are good and the data is good, the BBC and the government seem to want to ignore it? I can't see any logic for continuing this daily death toll.
Well, there's no logic whatsoever. And I challenge any of us to really understand what those graphs mean anymore and what they mean compared to before.
I know, because I've added the reinfections now, which is what's changed the infection fatality rate.
And also you had, I mean, the Daily Mail, we cancelled running them some time ago. And I actually had a near-death experience on Sunday.
What?
Yes, my fridge door fell on me. I had a near-death fridge door falling experience.
How does that happen?
Well, I just pulled it, and it's like 5 foot high.
How old is your fridge?
15 years.
Oh, God.
I believe in keeping things.
Yeah, no,
I'm
absolutely.
a conservative, for God's sake. Anyway, the whole door fell on top of me. I fell on the floor. And as I was lying there, just my legs and my arms and my head sort of wiggling out the side.
Quite efficient.
I thought, if I die now, I will be put down as a COVID death. That was going to be my last thought on this earth.
You refused to die.
So I did not die. So I would not become a statistic.
But Sean, that does, and thank God you're okay, Amanda. The fridge didn't get you.
No, you're a bit late coming in with that.
Well, no, because I'm just thinking, Sean, that does sum up the complete ludicrous nature of these stats.
Listen, I would stop the stats now, and I think the PM's right to do that. And it actually goes back to a conversation we had earlier in the show about bringing the NHS into the 21st century for us all and holding it to account in the correct way. These stats now have become a distraction. There's other things that are more important to the health of the nation: obesity, diabetes. All of these things are killing more people than COVID. And fridge doors. So we should be focusing on them. I think it's time to move it. But the real thing here is we want to move on as a nation. We're going to have to live with COVID, and part of living with COVID is not continually highlighting it as if it's an additional extra thing. We've been vaccinated. We know how to live with it. Let's move that figure and move on.
Nigel Nelson, we need to stop this daily death toll, don't we?
Guys, we're actually still in the middle of a pandemic.
No, we're not. Middle of a pandemic. Please.
We're coming out of it, I accept that. But today there were 534 deaths registered. That's the highest number of deaths we've had since last February. So
you've got to look at the average over 7 days, though, Nigel. It's very critical because there's
we'll
these
take an
bumps.
average over 7 days, then 300,000 COVID infections during that time.
Yeah, irrelevant.
So as a cut, it's up to you guys if you like. I think it's perfectly reasonable for a media outlet to say, no, we're not going to do the figures anymore. But the idea...
But I think the government must stop.
No, you don't ban them. Let people do it voluntarily.
OK, can I ask you a question then, Nigel? Can I ask you a question then? Why on earth does the government not provide us a daily flu tally?
Exactly. Flu.
Why on earth do they not tell us how many people have been diagnosed with cancer on a particular day? Every day? Why don't we get deaths from suicide every day? It's not practical. It's no way to live.
No, but the difference is that we are actually facing a new disease, a pandemic that we are coming out of, but we're not out of yet. It is handy to actually know what the figures are. If you're interested, I read them every day. Amanda doesn't have them in her paper, and so presumably...
Do you understand them, Nigel?
But
do you really understand them?
I understand the trends that are going on,
The problem here is that we have far bigger health concerns facing this country. Obesity kills more people than this. It leads to misery. It leads to poor mental health. Why don't we publish those figures? They would be much more useful for the health of the nation.
Shaming.
I mean, but they're figures. They'd be not calling anybody fat. The point is this: if we just
figures of
publish these
fat.
One set of figures, that's all we concentrate on. We have
we have
a nation
it's completely skewed the national conversation, Nigel, and you must accept that has meant we have missed out on a cancer epidemic, an epidemic of heart issues, an epidemic of strokes.
Those figures are available if you want to actually
but the BBC don't put them on the news every night, and they put the COVID figures on the news every night.
Is something that's going on now. And
the pandemic
while we have some restrictions in, so for instance, we are still maintaining the restriction whereby you have to isolate if you test positive. You don't have to do that with the other illnesses. When all those things go, those figures will disappear.
Well, I think they should go now too. Let's go back to trusting folk. If you've got symptoms, if you've got a bad cold, you stay at home because you don't want to spread it around. Surely the time
and don't open the fridge.
And definitely don't open
if you're alone.
Yeah. Fridges are obviously much more dangerous.
Now, after South Korea gifted us the incredible Squid Game, North Korea has given the world this. The secretive totalitarian state has released a bizarre new 110-minute-long propaganda film showcasing their great victorious year, which includes a unique explanation for Kim Jong-un's dramatic weight loss. While the international community has speculated about his health, the film, which also shows Kim galloping on a horse, insists their leader has simply decided to eat less for the sake of the country and out of concern for his people. In one striking scene, take a look at this, Kim seen wobbling going down a set of stairs as a narrator is heard saying his body completely withered away, and he showed his motherly side by greatly suffering and worrying to realise the dreams of the people. I do love a great work of fiction. Remember, this is the bloke who shot anyone who was discovered to have COVID in the early days. Amanda Patel, Sean Bailey, Nigel Nelson, do stand by, because coming up, my superstar panel will nominate for today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, have the hippies of the 60s betrayed their counterculture principles by going from champions of peace and love to free speech censors. Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill thinks the Joe Rogan Spotify row has exposed Neil Young, Joni Mitchell and their fellow radicals as allies of fear. He's next in The Outsider, just a few seconds away. First, though, here's what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, is it time we finally started treating COVID more like the flu? Dr. Charles Levinson is one medical expert making that call. He'll join me to discuss why folk are so reluctant to live with the virus even after Omicron. As the Queen prepares to mark 70 years since she ascended to the throne this weekend, Robert Jobson breaks down the latest royal headlines and whether Her Majesty can be proud of the current state of the monarchy. Plus, broadcasting legend Dame Jenny Murray and GBNews star Mark Dolan give their takes on the topics leading the news agenda, and I'll break down the day's headlines with my superstar panel. The conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the social media activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Brendan O'Neill is tonight's Outsider. And if you thought hippies were all for peace and love, well, think again. These days, it seems the once gentle stoles of Woodstock are more for putting people in the stocks. Aging rocker Neil Young and arch-hippie Joni Mitchell have both pulled their music from the platform Spotify for what they say is superstar podcaster Joe Rogan's rampant COVID misinformation. Rogan has tried to apologise and explain that he wants to hear from all viewpoints on his brilliant show, but the vain woke mob won't be satisfied until his career is destroyed. As Spiked Online's chief political writer Brendan O'Neill argues, the demonisation of Rogan is now out of control, and we must stop calling on big tech companies to censor certain voices. Brendan O'Neill, what's happened to our hippies?
The hippies have lost the plot. You know, I love Neil Young in particular. I like Joni Mitchell too. These were people who in the 60s and 70s were spreading great music and also a message of peace, love and freedom. And now you fast forward 50 years and they're actually calling on a huge corporation, in this case Spotify, to silence a man they don't like. So the great heroes of Woodstock have become agitators for capitalist censorship. They want the man to crush alternative ways of thinking and alternative ways of speaking. And what a sad end to hippiedom that really is.
Well, especially seeing Neil Young, you know, he even did free speech tours, didn't he?
He did, and he had a song rocking across the free world. You know, this is someone who, Neil Young in particular, was interested in freedom for most of his career. He had a great song in 1970 called Ohio, which was about the Kent State University massacre when 4 students were killed for protesting against the Vietnam War. And it was a great rebel song, and it was banned on numerous radio stations in the United States in 1970 for being too radical. And he turned to the cause of freedom of speech. He said that freedom of speech was the most important cause. And then in 2006, he went on the Freedom of Speech tour. And now you have Neil Young calling on Spotify, to essentially giving them an ultimatum. Either you silence Joe Rogan or I'm leaving. So the hippie really has become the stiff, and he's actually now demanding capitalist censorship of controversial people.
It's slightly ironic, isn't it? Because if I remember rightly, you know, Neil Young a few years back was spreading what he might describe as misinformation about genetically engineered crops and food, because he didn't like that. And a lot of the things that he was putting out there were not exactly proven. But Brendan O'Neill, I was completely fine with that. It was his opinion. But it's odd, isn't it, that it's okay when it's his opinion, but it's not okay when Joe Rogan is hosting experts like Dr. Robert Malone, who I understand is a controversial figure. I've had him on the show, but whether you like him or not, he's one of the blokes who helped invent mRNA vaccinations. And without him and without his work, we might not have the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine.
Yeah, Neil Young is a bit of a hypocrite, to be honest, because, as you say, he did a whole album of songs about GMOs, genetically modified organisms, GM food, in which he promoted completely anti-scientific nonsense about that great development. So, that's one problem with hippies. They go too far down the green route and they end up spouting anti-scientific claptrap, really. So he's a hypocrite now for saying that Joe Rogan is anti-science. But also, the thing is, if we censor misinformation about COVID vaccines, I think there's two problems with that. Firstly, we make it seem like the COVID vaccination program is something that we need to be defensive about. I don't think we should be defensive about it. I think it's a great program. It's very safe, and it's saved a lot of people's lives. And also, it gives the anti-vaxxers, it makes them feel like martyrs. I bet there are lots of anti-vaxxers around right now looking at the pylon against Joe Rogan and thinking to themselves, see, we were right all along. They've got something to hide. There's something going on behind the scenes. We knew that we were right. So it's the worst of both worlds when you censor these kinds of discussions. And I think Joe Rogan is absolutely right to want to have honest, open discussions with all sorts of people.
No, I think you're right, Brendan O'Neill. So where does this go now? I mean, we're seeing some other hippie artists weigh in, but at this point, there hasn't been that moment where a Taylor Swift, where an Adele, or where a Justin Bieber says, we're joining you.
No, not yet. I mean, I don't think that's going to come. I mean, lots of those kinds of people are more interested in their profit margin, really, than making a political stand. But I think it's going to go in a dangerous direction. And if you look at the demonization of Joe Rogan, I think it's really outrageous, actually. He's not an anti-vaxxer. He actually has he says most people should get the vax. He's a very thoughtful, considerate interviewer and podcaster. He's a very intelligent man. This idea that he's an alt-right, crazy, anti-vaxxer fascist is complete nonsense. But the demonization of him, I think, is a sign of things to come. If you break away from the consensus in any way whatsoever, you will be demonized, you will be threatened with censorship. So it's so important that we stand against the hippies and stand for the right of freedom of speech for Joe Rogan.
Well, of course, and as Joe Rogan says, and it's something that I've said many times as well, a lot of the things that Rogan and folk like you, Brendan, and folk like me were being criticised for saying back in 2020, maybe even being called conspiracy theorists, now accepted as common fact and repeated ad nauseum on mainstream broadcast outlets like CNN, who've got virtually every moment of this pandemic wrong. So, Brendan O'Neill, I think you're completely right. And shame on the hippies. Brendan will speak again next week. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel is back with me. Amanda Patel, who's your nomination for Greatest Britain this week?
To the end. Mixed-couple curling champions who performed today in the Olympics. They are our Torval and Dean of curling. Okay. And I swear, when I saw them rushing around the ice rink with those brooms, I could hear Bolero playing. And a little-known fact is that after equestrian events at the Olympics, curling is the Queen's second favourite sport.
OK. Sean Bailey, similar theme?
Mine's is the British Winter Olympic team, all 50 of them going out to contest in 11 different events. I just think it'd be great to get behind them. I love a national project where we're all on the same side. And
well, yeah, maybe if it wasn't being held in communist China, which unleashed COVID-19 on the world and
the British Olympic team are not responsible for that.
No, I know, but I just can't get excited about
keeping our morale up, giving us someone to support. And look, we're talking about this could be our greatest medal haul from a Winter Olympics. I'd love to see that.
Nigel Nelson, your nominee?
Yeah, mine's Simon Cowell for bravely showing off his arm in a cast today, having fallen off his bicycle. And that, I think, is a public service warning to all those cyclists who will be following the new highway code and cycling two abreast down the middle of the road.
No, very good point. I'm going to make Simon Cowell my Greatest Britain actually today. But my goodness, Simon, get rid of your e-bike, OK? Because they're very dangerous things and you've been seriously injured twice now. Let's not go for a third time. Amanda Patel, your Union Jackass nomination.
It's the voice on Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which says the automated version, where you basically don't talk to a person, you have to key everything in. And it says, we will not tolerate abuse on the grounds of race, gender, religion, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, or something else, which is if you're sexually transitioning. It's a robot. It's a computer.
Very good one. Sean Bailey, your nomination.
Mine's is Chris O'Shea. He's the chairman of British Gas, or actually the parent company. He's going to be working from home, which I think is disgraceful. He's running a big company. He should be encouraging everybody to get back to the office because our economy needs it. Plus, we're about to have our energy bills go through the roof.
Yeah, no, good point. Nigel Nelson, just your name of yours.
Nadine Dorries.
And it's for this moment.
And the reason being that for trying to say that Boris Johnson can't say if he was in his own flat until the police have had their say.
Yeah, OK. Well, I'm going to go with Chris O'Shea. I think Sean Bailey is completely right. Get back into the office, man. What a fabulous superstar panel tonight. Amanda Patel, Sean Bailey, Nigel Nelson, thank you so much. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Headliners is next. Good night.
Hi there. A cloudy night for most of us, with some rain, mainly towards the northwest, and it will be mild with that blanket of cloud covering the UK. A warm front has gone through. That continues to march northeastwards overnight, and following that warm front, we've got a westerly breeze and mild, moist air coming in off the Atlantic. So that breeze is bringing that extensive cloud cover. A few breaks in the cloud across central and southern parts of the country overnight, but nothing particularly widespread or long-lasting. And even under the cloud breaks, with the breeze coming from the west-southwest, it is going to stay mild. Temperatures, well, around 8 or 7 degrees first thing. 4 Celsius there in Lerwick, one of the colder spots, but frost-free for virtually everyone. And damp towards western hills and coasts in particular, with that rainfall persistent over the Welsh Mountains, the Pennines, the Scottish Highlands throughout much of Thursday. However, there will be some cloud breaks for central and southern parts of England, South Wales, some sunshine coming through for Thursday afternoon. 11 Celsius here, but it's turning colder in the far northwest as a spell of wet and windy weather arrives. A lively spell of weather with some heavy rain and gales along this feature as it moves south across Scotland, Northern Ireland into Northern England and Wales. And over the higher ground of Wales, Northern England and Scotland, we're likely to see a brief spell of snow. Could even see some snowflakes to lower levels in places, particularly the southeast of England, by the end of Friday night. Colder air is following the weather front, but also brighter skies. So once early cloud and rain is out of the way from the southeast, actually plenty of sunny spells. However, the cold wind will feel raw and it will contain a lot of showers in the north and the west, those falling as sleet and snow over the higher ground and even to lower levels for northern Scotland. Saturday brings with it more cloud and some rain in the far north, along with a strengthening wind.